How's it, guys? Welcome to part two. Unless you haven't seen part one, then this is your part one. Irrespective, part two. It's a little. I'm just sharing some stories that kind of piece together a journey that brought me to quite a significant point in my life. And so part one was more early days, and part two I'm going to carry on from where I left off, which is essentially just after I'd left the army and I was running rampant, not really interested in working. I was all about, if I had to sum it up, I was all about self-gratification. It was all about me. It was all about my pleasure, pursuing what I wanted, getting what I wanted, doing what I wanted, which was pretty much nothing, just drugs. Just, yeah, that was pretty much it in a nutshell. Through that journey of drugs, which was predominantly a copious amount of dacha and then quite a bit of LSD. The group of friends that I was a part of, we started engaging in things like the occult or Wicca magic and things like that. I wasn't, being a person that was probably more atheist than anything else. I wasn't that interested. But my mates were, and so it was sort of part of what they were doing. And the longer we were journeying together in the drug culture, the more like blatant that became, that sort of part of the drug culture. And to put it in a nutshell, to call it what it was or what it is, the darker it became, you know. And and so that was part of the journey as well. Now, I must be honest, I always have had quite an intrigue for why, I think we all do, why are things the way they are? Why do they work the way they work? And so I hadn't been brought up religious. I hadn't, there wasn't, my folks were good, solid folks, really good, solid folks, but they're not religious, so they weren't Christian. Um, you get the questionnaire, what are you? What religion are you? And then you got to tick it off at school. I don't know if you remember that one. And then I had to ask my folks, what are we? And they would say, well, we're Protestant. And so I didn't even know what that was. So cool, tick off Protestant, hand in the form. No idea what that was. I don't think they even really knew. It was just the difference between Catholic and Protestant. That's pretty much it. No, nothing more than that. But what was becoming very interesting is in this journey and obviously dabbling in the occult and started reading books like the Bhagavad Gita, the Hare Krishna thing, and even got the Book of Mormon, read that, and read books on transcendental meditation and books on the occult and books on whatever, a whole lot of stuff. Philosophy, I enjoyed philosophy as well. So I was reading a lot of these kind of things, trying to figure out what the heck this is all about, like we all do. What's it all about? What's the purpose? What's the point? Da, da, da. But at the same time, in this cloud of drugs and psychedelics and just, pursuing self-gratification. What was quite interesting, though, is I remember a couple of times when we used to go clubbing, which I wasn't really a clubber, but I'd go clubbing because my mates were there and that's where the drugs were. So that's where you'd go for the drugs. So I'd go and we'd be in the club and I'd start to sort of have these experiences. I would definitely call them spiritual experiences, and everyone will go, oh, well, you're on LSD. Oh, fair enough, you're on LSD, but yes, there are things that you start to experience and encounter in psychedelics that do change perception and do change perspective and the way you think or the way you relate. Don't really need to get into too much of that because it actually becomes irrelevant as you'll find out. So anyway, I was in that place, in that sort of searching, wondering, pondering. But I used to come out of those clubs, and often there were these oaks that that would be on the street side, and they'd come up to you while you're walking. We'd go to this cafe called Cadiz to get I would always get like a big bar one, because their takeaway food was always dodge. I remember once getting a fish bone in a vegetable spring roll. That's Cadiz. That's Cadiz for you. Yeah, 3 in the morning or whatever, 4 in the morning, so you never know what you're going to get. Weevil bread. We used to buy weevil bread, which was basically just a brownie or crunchy or something like that, but we'd call it weevil bread. So we'd be going to the shop, and there'd oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes be these oaks on the pavement who would come up to you and say, "Hey man, how's it? I just wanted to see if I could have a moment of your time." And then they would want to tell you about how God loves you. And I remember I used to rip into them in response, just this vile response, like aggressive, vile response. And then I would walk away, thinking like, yeah, I never really understood it. And in fact, if I think back, there wasn't much communication. I didn't know anybody that was Christian. I didn't know what Christianity was. I had no idea. There were three stories that I must share with you. One is, I remember a teacher once telling a story at assembly at primary school about Jesus and and a miracle that he did with a dove and something, and that was it. And I was like, sure, that's quite interesting, whatever. But that was it. And it was just a fascinating little story. I was probably like 7 or something like that. The other thing that I do remember is Martin Bion. I used to sleep over at his house a lot, and then on Sunday morning, sometimes his parents would take us to church, which was an NG church in town, and I'd go with them. And so we'd go to this church, and I think I went about 3 or 4 times, but every single time I would break into a fit of hysterical laughter and then embarrass his whole family, pee off his dad, because his dad was quite a stern oak, pee off his dad. They would get me out of this thing because I would literally just be canning myself in the service. So after 3 or 4 attempts, they never took me back. But I didn't know why that happened. I really didn't know. I just literally broke into hysterical fit of laughter. That's all I can explain it as. The other moment that I had in terms of Christianity is in about standard 9, which is grade 11. A good mate of mine at the time, probably my best mate at the time, Bradley Wade, he'd gone off on some camp somewhere on one of the holidays that we have during the year, and he'd actually become a Christian. I didn't know what that meant, but he came back from this camp and he was like, "Wow, I need to tell you about something that happened." And he was trying to tell me this, and I just the wall went up, and I hated him from that point on until 5-6 years. From that point on, I literally began to hate him. I literally began to actually do things intentionally to be horrible to him. Just horrible. Even although we were in a band together, I would try to write lyrics that would get under his skin. That was, I didn't understand why. And I remember in response to him telling me this story, I was very much into the Doors and Jim Morrison and The Cure. They were some of my bands. And I remember spray painting down on one of the walks home. I used to walk from the high school home, and there was this wall that was probably about 20 meters long, Vibercrete wall. And I remember spray painting along that wall in big black spray, "Jesus Christ is dead. Jim Morrison lives forever." I don't know why. No idea. No idea. But I do, what started happening and coming out of these club moments when I used to get vile and aggro in response towards these guys. That started what the heck, man? What the heck's that all about? It started playing in my mind. That was when I was about 20. Started really playing in my mind. Why am I so aggro? What has happened? Why? What is it? But not only that, a more important question occurred to me. And it was simply this. Of all the things I was delving into in terms of transcendental meditation, astral projection, or astral travel, Bhagavad Gita, the Book of Mormons, even the Quran, which I read as well, parts of the Quran I read, the English, whatever version of it. Reading all these books and all these philosophers, and even listening to things that music coming across in terms of words and songs, and there was all this symbolism, but there was also something that really hit me, because we started, as I said, getting involved in occultic things. And there was an element of Satanism. There was an element of occultism. There was an element of Wicca. All of these things. And what started hitting me was this one question. One thing I noticed. Everybody, and all of these books, all of these writers, but everybody has an opinion on who they think Jesus is. Even I had one. I thought he was a lie. I thought he was, I hated him. Don't know why I hated him, but I hated him. But everyone worked him in. He was either like a wise man or a sage or a prophet, or he was, some people said he was God. Some people said he was an angel. Some people said he was just a really nice guy. Some people said he was a political figure. Some people said he was just a figment of our imagination. Some people said he was the liar and the deceiver. And, so everybody had an opinion. Everybody had an opinion. And that started really challenging me. And that question wouldn't leave me. Now, at the same time, I literally was starting to lose my mind, to the point that I couldn't have conversations with anybody else. There was such a level of distrust because people were just using each other. That's all I saw, people using each other. Then suddenly I started realizing how much I use people as well. So I was scared of myself. So I was distrust towards other people, but I was scared of myself, my own motives. Like I started becoming aware of how selfish I was, how I couldn't care less about anybody else, not even my mother, who had endured court cases and all sorts of things with me, and yet I hated her, and it didn't make sense. But that question, who is this Jesus? Why is he so important? Here's the question. Why is he so important that everybody comments on who they think he is? That's part 2.